Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video on the channel. And Bruno Guimaraes is officially a gunner. Arsenal have completed a blockbuster transfer for one of the best midfielders in the Premier League, joining the best team in the Premier League. Let's discuss. If you guys are new members to the channel, welcome. If you're a returning member, welcome back. If you guys enjoy the content you're seeing, algorithm, like the video, comment, subscribe, hype it. The only way this channel will grow is if you guys continue to support. So if you enjoy the things you're seeing on the channel, support. It's free. This signing for Arsenal is absolutely monumental. I think when Arsenal go about signing the players they do, and you look at some of the transfer windows they've had in the previous years, I look at the signings of a Madueke, a Christian Norgard, a Mosquera, and even other team players like Kepa Arrizabalaga, Raheem Sterling. Of course, these poor signings have been amongst better signings like your Declan Rices, your Urian Timbers, your Calafioris. They have had good signings, but this really feels like a monumental statement signing. I think since that signing of Declan Rice a few seasons ago, Arsenal haven't really gone out and made that blockbuster signing that you sit there and say, oh, these guys are coming. And last year, Arsenal went on to win that Premier League that they've been chasing for about the last 4 years now. And you wondered, how are they going to build on this? How are they going to move to the next level? How do you improve on a team that's already done the ultimate? But I think this sort of signing just signals to you that Arsenal are not concerned about the future. Arsenal are not concerned about the distant future. They're concerned about winning now. And when you go out and buy a player like Bruno Guimaraes, when you go out and buy a player of his profile, when you go out and buy a player of his attitude, when you go out and obtain a talent of this nature, a talent of this age, I think it just tells you everything you need to know. Because for me, especially in today's age of football where it feels as though every single transfer has an underlying motive, it feels as though every single transfer is made with the idea of selling the player on in the future and the chances that they don't succeed. This feels like a signing for the here and now. This feels like a signing that says you're coming into this midfield today and you are making an impact. Because what Bruno Guimaraes represents is not just that Arsenal are the best team in the league, but that Arsenal continue to want to be the best team in the league. Bruno Guimaraes, we've seen what he offers at Newcastle the last few seasons. We've seen what he offered after his move from Lyon, essentially becoming the captain at the football club. He's represented the Tyneside community. He's represented Newcastle. He's worn his heart on his sleeve. And it's looked like a player that probably wasn't going to leave Newcastle for a very, very long time. But guys, a player like Bruno Guimaraes, he's everything and more that this Arsenal team need. Especially when you look at some of the players in this team, they're kind of timid. They're kind of passive in certain situations. Bruno Guimaraes is everything but that. Bruno Guimaraes can be your number 6 who sits deep and receives the ball from the defenders. Bruno Guimaraes can be that number 8 box-to-box midfielder. Bruno Guimaraes can be that box-crashing midfielder that comes into the box behind the striker and finishes off goals. He's neat, he's tidy, but he's got a bit of aggression about him. He's got a bit of bite. He's got a bit of steel about him that Arsenal, I don't say they need it because I think this is a team that's full of physical players, but I don't think you're worse off getting more players like that in your team. Getting players who, for all intents and purposes, oh wow, the wind is really starting to pick up. For all intents and purposes, Bruno Guimaraes is not a winner. When you look at his CV, when you look at his resume, when you look at the trophies that he has accrued throughout his career, Bruno Guimaraes is not a seasoned winner. But there are some players, irrespective of how many trophies they've won, irrespective of what they've achieved in their career, they represent the mentality of winning. They represent the mentality of winning. Some players are losers and some players are winners. And even before they go on to win those trophies, even before they go on to celebrate and really indulge themselves in the regularity of trophy lifting, you know that this player is set for the very top. And Bruno Guimaraes is one of those players. Bruno Guimaraes is one of those players in my opinion. And coming into a team that already knows what it is, they know what they're good at, they know what they represent, and they're the champions. Those are the sort of players that you need. Those are the players with the mentality that will keep that winning run going. And that's exactly what Arsenal are going for. I think him coming into this team, it adds a completely different element. Arsenal don't have any players like Bruno Guimaraes. They have that Declan Rice player who was pretty much played into the ground last season. And you could tell really needed rest throughout the season. But I think a player like Bruno Guimaraes allows you to rest a player like Declan Rice. He can play with a Declan Rice. He can play instead of a Declan Rice. Bruno Guimaraes just adds another quip to Arsenal's repertoire. He just adds another piece to their puzzle. Miles Lewis-Skelly will be looking at this transfer as a possible, it might be a possible reason why he might not play as much next season. It might be a possible stumbling block in his development. But in my opinion, this should be another reason for Miles Lewis-Skelly to be motivated. When you play for one of the best teams in the world, when you play for one of the most successful teams in the country, you should expect competition. And in my opinion, competition is actually what reaps better performances. And you saw it last season when Zubimendi wasn't performing at the level that Arsenal fans would have been hoping. When Zubimendi wasn't performing at the level that Mikel Arteta would have been hoping, Miles Lewis-Skelly stepped into the team. Miles Lewis-Skelly performed in the Champions League semi-final. Miles Lewis-Skelly performed in the run-in in the Premier League. And he did it to aplomb. And I think Bruno Guimaraes coming into the team just continues that trend of, if you're not playing well enough, we have better players on the bench who can come in and step in. We have better players who can come in and step in. And I think that just continues this trend. As I mentioned, Bruno Guimaraes, he's a dog. He has that steel. We saw it many times throughout his career in Newcastle. You don't want to play against him. Alongside Tonali, alongside Joe Linton in that midfield, he is a problem to deal with. The guy is incredibly technical, but as I mentioned, he's got that physicality about him. And him coming into this side, I think it adds just so much dynamism to this Arsenal team. I will say, I don't believe this is the thing that Arsenal desperately needed. I don't think this is the thing that Arsenal coming into this transfer window would have looked at and said, we need Bruno Guimaraes. But that's what the top teams do. We might not need Bruno Guimaraes, but we're going to get Bruno Guimaraes. We might not need a Michael Essien when Chelsea won the Premier League, but we're going to get a Michael Essien. We might not need a Thiago Alcantara when Liverpool won the league, but they got a Thiago Alcantara. This is what the big teams do. This is what dynasties do. And Arsenal are setting up to do just that. Arsenal are setting up to do just that. As I said, I don't think this is the signing that takes Arsenal to that next level. I think Bruno Guimaraes can come in and fit into what Arsenal already have. I don't think this changes a lot in the way they play. I don't think this changes a lot in the way teams look at Arsenal. I still believe they need that attacking player. I think if they had gotten a player like Vinicius Jr., who has signed that new contract with Real Madrid today as I'm recording this, I think that would have taken them to a completely new level. I think that would have taken to a stratosphere that you really have to start looking at Arsenal as real contenders, real favorites, real people, and people that you need to be scared of in the Champions League. But as I said, do not discredit the signing. This is a big signing for Arsenal. This is a big signing for Bruno Guimaraes. This is his last chance to really get that big move in his career, and he's taking it with both hands. But with Vinicius signing that new contract, I still believe that Arsenal needs to look around. Bradley Barcola is still in the shopping market. Of course, Yan Diomande is signed for Real Madrid. There are options out there. Of course, they signed Christian Solis to replace Leandro Trossard. But in my opinion, Leandro Trossard wasn't good enough. Gabriel Martinelli isn't good enough. Bukayo Saka is struggling with injuries. You hope he can get to another level next season. And if he does get to that level, perhaps they don't need that player. Madueke, in my opinion, is not good enough. So I still think Arsenal need a bit more in the attacking areas. I even look at their striking options. I still don't think those players are good enough. But last season, I think Arsenal showed that they can do it without having incredible firepower up top. They still show they can do it with a little bit of conservatism, with a little bit of passivity, with that element of perhaps they might not do it. But now, I look at a league where Pep Guardiola's gone. Enzo Maresca's coming into a new side. I look at a league where Antonio Raiola is now at the helm at Liverpool. A league where Xabi Alonso is coming in at Chelsea, in which Chelsea have no Champions League football and are rebuilding, it looks like, for the 10th time in the last four or 5 seasons. You look at a Manchester United who are under Michael Carrick. New manager. Of course, he was here halfway through last season, but full season now under Michael Carrick. You've got Champions League football to contend with, and it's a very thin squad, and they haven't added many pieces to that team. And you look at a league in which Roberto De Zerbi, one of the most volatile managers in the league, is at Tottenham Hotspur, a team who have finished 17th in back-to-back seasons. So I don't believe Arsenal need those attacking dynamite or that attacking firepower to win the league next year. In my opinion, they could probably go into this season with what they have and probably win it again. I don't think it would be a cakewalk, but I still believe they have the best manager in the league. But if you want to win that European trophy that Arsenal have never won, if you want to go out there and etch your name in the history books of European pantheon of greats, I think you need to go and get that real game changer in the attacking areas. My goodness, this wind is blowing. It wasn't even blowing like this when I stepped out initially, so I don't know why it's blowing now. But as I'm saying, I still think you need a little bit more. But I think the thing to really discuss, in my opinion, is what does this mean for Newcastle? And I didn't make a video after Eddie Howe left, which we'll come on to talk about. because I wanted to see how things would develop. I wanted to see how things would develop with Bruno Guimaraes, whether he would stay, whether he would leave, with all the negotiations back and forth in the club. But you look at this team now, and it's a Newcastle team that we know how much money was invested into this team. We know the acquisition from the Saudi Arabian, pretty much, investment fund. And we know the expectation that surrounded this football club when that acquisition was completed. I believe that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And when Eddie Howe was appointed as the manager, and the feeling around Tyneside was of positivity, and you had players like Almiron hitting a new level, the fans were really behind the team after a terrible time under Michael Ashley. Was it Michael Ashley, I believe his name was, their former owner. And it felt like there was a new dawn embarking upon Newcastle. Well, you fast forward a few years now, and I think now with the departure of Bruno Guimaraes, I think that's really finally the departure of all those players that you looked at Newcastle and said, these players might be the pillars that carry Newcastle to that new echelon of not just English, but European football. I'm talking about the likes of Anthony Gordon, the likes of Alexander Isak, the likes of Bruno Guimaraes now, the likes of Sandro Tonali. These were the players who, when they joined Newcastle, and they all had their feelings around them when they joined. They all had their doubts around them when they joined. Anthony Gordon, when he joined Newcastle, there was a lot of doubts around him. They felt as though there was a lot of money spent on a player who hadn't really proven himself at Liverpool, or in Liverpool, specifically Everton. There was doubts around Alexander Isak, struggled with injuries at Real Sociedad, but you knew there was a player in there, and he went on to show how good he is. Sandro Tonali didn't want to leave Milan, and the only reason they sold him was for financial reasons. And Bruno Guimaraes, there was a lot of interest around Europe, but he chose Newcastle. And I think now you look at the players that have left the football club. You look at the players that are still at the football club. I look at so many of those players in that squad, and I look at them and I say, how are you still here? I look at a player like Jacob Murphy. Now, all respect to Jacob Murphy. I think he's done an incredible job to squeeze out as much output from his talents as he has these last few seasons. Particularly, I believe it was last 2 seasons ago where it felt like the man couldn't stop assisting Alexander Isak. But guys, let's be perfectly honest. Jacob Murphy's an average footballer. Jacob Murphy is a low mid-table footballer, and that's perfectly fine. And that was fine when Newcastle were acquired by the Saudi Arabian investment fund a few years ago. But now when you're a side who have been in Champions League in 2 of the last 3 seasons, that cannot run. That cannot run. Jacob Murphy should not be a starting player. He should not be a pivotal factor in your team week in, week out. A player like Anthony Elanga, you look at some of the investments they've made post the likes of Isak, Tonali, Guimaraes, Anthony Gordon, they've really struggled to make a mark at Newcastle. I'm looking at someone like Vissa, who pretty much threw his toys out of the pram to get that move away from Brentford, and then had an absolutely abysmal season at Newcastle. You look at Nick Woltemade, who started the season incredibly well last year, and then just fell off a cliff, whether that was with complications with the manager or the player not playing to the level that was expected due to the price tag. Of course, there was always going to be an element of panic after the sale of Alexander Isak, in which Newcastle in that whole saga made themselves look like an absolute fool, considering the fact that they continued to harp on about the fact they wouldn't sell Isak the whole summer just to sell him on deadline day, failed to acquire any of their targets in Delap, João Pedro, Ekitike, Mbuemo, Cunha. It never felt like Newcastle, despite the money that obviously exists within the club, it never felt like they got that trust or they got that belief within the club, or at least amongst players outside the club, that this is a team that you could respect and this is a team that you should join if you want to play at the upper echelons of the sport. It never felt like that really happened. And of course, there are external factors that led into all this, the financial implications, the financial restrictions that have been put on the football club and the Premier League as a whole that has really hampered Newcastle. I mean, you look at some of the sales they've had to administer, the likes of Elliot Anderson leaving the club for FFP reasons. Vlachodimos is being used in a money laundering scheme, if we're being completely honest. Newcastle haven't been able to spend money as they would if there were no restrictions, and the same way that Chelsea were allowed to spend and Man City were allowed to spend. They haven't been given that luxury. But I still believe there should have been an evolution in this project throughout the years. I look at a manager like Eddie Howe, who's ultimately left the football club now, and I think the way that he left and the timing in which he left kind of just suggests that this was not a decision that was expected around the football club. For a manager to leave halfway through preseason with just less than a month to the regular season to go, I don't think that was a decision that was made mutually between the entire club. between the manager, between the upper management, between the players and the club as a whole. I don't believe that was a mutual agreement. I think that was Eddie Howe becoming obsessed, or should I say, just completely done with the situation at the football club. And Eddie Howe is a solid manager, but I don't think Eddie Howe should have still been the manager at this point. I don't think he believed he would have still been the manager. I don't think the fans would have still believed that. I don't even think the owners would have still believed he'd still be the manager till this day, or a few weeks ago. Because Eddie Howe is not an elite manager. And I think the evolution of the club would have probably been, we start off with an Eddie Howe, we start off with these average players, all due respect, and we build. You buy an Isaac, you buy a Guimaraes, you buy a Gordon, you qualify for the Champions League. You consolidate yourself as a Champions League club. You then start to elevate yourself. You then start to build the reputation, build the brand of the football club, such that you attract the bigger names, such that you attract the bigger managers, such that you attract Champions League football, and you establish yourself at the upper echelons of the league. But they've really failed to do that. I mean, I think it really hurt them qualifying for the Champions League, finishing in the mid-table, and then qualifying for the Champions League again. I think one thing nowadays that is really underestimated is that ability to really establish yourself in the Champions League, season in, season out, season in, consistently getting that revenue from the Champions League, which is ridiculous money. Don't get it twisted. The Champions League is ridiculous money. I think they really struggled in doing that. And I think that really hampered their ability to sign players. I think that really hampered their financial restrictions, because when you're not making as much revenue from the Champions League, it limits how much you can actually spend. And then tie into that the fact that players don't really want to go to Newcastle. If there's a Man United lurking, if there's a Manchester City lurking, if there's a Liverpool, if there's a Spurs, if there's a Barcelona, why would I go to Newcastle? So it makes sense. And it's a shame, because this is a project that could have definitely grown. And I think I can understand the frustration amongst the fan base and within the club, especially when you look at teams like Chelsea, teams like Manchester City, who are able to spend freely. But the age of football that we exist in, there needs to be financial restrictions. You look at clubs like Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, Chelsea, of course. These clubs, if there were no restrictions, they spend however they want, while my football club is holding on to every single euro we can find. So it's a shame for Newcastle. I think this is a big signing for Arsenal. Let's not make this video an entire Newcastle video. I want to go back to Arsenal and really just hammer home that I think this is a huge signing for the team. As I said, I don't think this takes them to a whole new stratosphere that they weren't before, but I think this is a big signing to really send home that message that Arsenal are not mucking about. Arsenal are here to stay, and Arsenal are looking to win trophies in the here and now. Big signing for Arteta, big signing for Arsenal, big signing for Bruno Guimaraes, finally getting to that higher level within the footballing hierarchy. And I'm excited to see what happens. But of course, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section. What do you make of this signing for Arsenal? Do you think it is a good signing? Do you think Bruno Guimaraes is going to improve them? Do you think he will be at the epicenter of their pursuit of back-to-back Premier League titles? And what do you think about Newcastle's epidemic or Newcastle's predicament? Do you believe that this is a project that can still develop and evolve to the level that they would have predicted post-acquisition? Or do you think that this is a project that is kind of dying away as we know it? As you guys can tell, I'm outside. I'm enjoying the weather. Summertime is coming to a quick end. Feels like the summer just started yesterday. But I'm outside, as John Obi Mikel would say. I'm enjoying myself. So, of course, you guys, as I always say, algorithm, get involved. Let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.